Hi, my name's Katie. I'm the Development Officer at Green Estate, and today we're going to be looking at the topic of health and hygiene in the Tudor times. So the activity we're going to do is make a Tudor herb bag.
Using herbs for a medicinal purpose has a long history, and the late 15th century to the early 17th century was no different. Herbs were used for decoration as well as cooking and in the making of perfumes and cures. Throughout the 16th century, the plague was a regular occurrence, leading up to the mass outbreak in 1665. During that time, it was widely believed that the plague came from foul smells. There was no real concept of germs like we understand today, or at least an understanding of how they would spread from one to another. It wasn't until much later on in history when we discovered that the plague had actually been passed on through fleas on rats. Therefore, a common accessory around this time would have been a plague bag or a herb bag, which was filled with sweet scented plants. These were carried around, pressed to the nose, or stuffed into beaks of masks. It was the belief that if you inhale the goodness contained in the herb bags, it would prevent you from being infected by the foul plague. The popular nursery rhyme, Ring a Ring a Roses, stems back to this era in history, and when the verse mentions a pocket full of posies, this references the herb bags. Authentic herbs included roses, lavender, cinnamon, and elder. These would be wrapped in a piece of muslin cloth to make the bag. So let's see if we can make our own. Whilst we're doing our best to protect the NHS, it's important to stay at home. So here are a few herbs that you might find in your garden. Before picking anything, make sure you get permission from a responsible adult to make sure that you don't harm the plant. There are two plants which look quite similar and are both good for using in these herb bags. One of them is rosemary. You might recognise the smell from Sunday dinners or roast potatoes, as it is a popular herb for edible cuisine. Lavender is also a woody plant, and you might recognise the smell of this from candles or bath soaps. It is a popular fragrance in a lot of modern health and well-being products. For making our herb bags, we can also use violets and pansies, as these are edible flowers. Here in my garden, I have some bay leaves, which will be useful when making the herb bags. The little flowers of forget-me-nots can also be used, as well as bellis or daisies and primulas. Before picking anything, make sure you've asked your responsible adult for permission, as they might also know some extra plants that I've not named here. Each garden is unique, and I'm sure there are plenty of plants in your own space that you can use. As we'll only need a small amount of herbs, it should be possible to pull off just one or two leaves with your fingers. Some more tender herbs that you might have in your garden could be mint, sage, basil, or parsley. Either of these can be used for this activity.
So here in this bowl I've got all my herbs that I've collected from the kitchen and from the garden. And then I've also got this extra addition of some oranges, which is really easy to make and it smells really nice in your herb bags. So I'll quickly tell you how I made those. So the smell of dried oranges actually usually reminds me of Christmas or Christmas wreaths, but it is very fitting for today, especially when we're trying to be resourceful and make the most of what we've got at home. So how I make these little orange segments is, once I've finished eating my orange, I'll save the skin and then slice it up into really small chunks, just like I've got in the jar here. I'll put them on an oven tray and then I'll bake them in the oven for maybe an hour on a really low temperature, just until they dry out. And you'll just be able to check yourself when they're ready, because if you can hear that, it's like a hard sound because these have gone hard. And then you take them out, leave them to cool down, and you'll find that they smell really nice, like a strong orange smell, obviously. So now we're going to start actually putting it together. So we'll put our herbs to one side just for a second, and then you want to lay your piece of material out flat. So like I said, I'm using a piece of muslin, but it's up to you what material you use. If you haven't got any material in, you could always use an old sock if needs be, and use that to tie up and put the herbs in. So you've got your muslin laid out nice and flat, and then what you want to do is take your herbs and break them up a little bit at a time and just leave them in the middle of your cloth. So I'm just sticking to herbs mainly, so I've got some rosemary here, put a bit more in, and then this is my lavender. I've got a little bit of fennel here, which is just starting to grow nicely, some sage, some mint, and some basil. So very much your traditional herbs, and you should be able to find them knocking around. And then now I'm going to put my oranges in that I made. Now we're going to start putting the actual bag together. So if there's any last little bits that you want to add in, I've got some spring flowers here that I've dried out because I like collecting them. So I'm going to pop those in because they've got a nice currant smell. Then you're going to grab each corner, make a triangle shape. Then you're going to grab the other two corners and put your hand lower down, shake it as you do and twist as you go along so that you've got a nice little bunch at the bottom here. And you can make it as tight to it as you want or as loose as you want. So now to tie it together, I've just got a little bit of twine here from the garden because it's all I could find spare. But anything that you can find, string or maybe ribbon or something crafty if you've got the supplies at home. And you just want to wrap it round so that it secures it together, and then you have your own little herb bag. I hope that you've had fun learning, and we look forward to seeing you on site again soon.